In this video, we're going to look at smart chords, and this lets you play 4 voice chords by pressing just 1 or 2 notes on your keyboard. So if you're not great at arranging chords for brass sections, Session Horns Pro can do it for you. Now we enable it by pressing that little circle there, and that turns on smart chord. And when it's in the smart chord mode, only the smart voice split or polyphonic voicing assistant modes work. So the idea is that we click the small round button to turn it on, and then we open the actual smart chord window with this little cog icon over here. Now the idea is that we set a root note and then a chord map, and once we choose that from these drop-down menus, the chords defined by the root note and the chord map will be automatically assigned to the white notes on the keyboard starting at C. Now, for example, I have a little pattern done up here in the key of B flat. Here are the chords. So what I've done is I've programmed in notes in the key of C. There's C, and I'm just playing single notes here. C, and then A, and then D, and then G. And these are going to automatically get transposed to the key that I set this in. So I set it to B flat major, and they'll play back in the key of B flat. Now let's listen to this without smart chord first. Now you're going to hear just single notes. Now you'll notice the last chord I have here is not a diatonic chord in the key of B flat major, it's an altered chord. So we're going to hear how the voicing assistant and the smart chord function voices that, and it's not going to work in a lot of the cases, but it's interesting to explore how it's going to voice the chords with some of the altered extensions that are possible. So let's start by turning on smart chord and just starting with the stock B flat major. With no modifications, we just use the white notes, and it's going to voice it for us in 4-note voicings. Now, where this gets really interesting is when we use the black notes over here to add or change the texture and color of the voicings. But let's start with the vanilla white note only voicings. So you can hear that it didn't work very well with the altered chord there. Now let's select our next example, and I'm going to bring up the smart chords. And in this one, what I've done is I've triggered the black note C sharp, and what this does is it'll trigger altered chord voicings. Now the C sharp, they call it warm. It adds mostly 7s and 9s to the chords. So this will work for the most part. And if you look in the piano roll editor and the graphic editor, what I've done is I've just added in one single note over here on C sharp and just stretched it to fit the length of the whole region, and then I've turned on chase notes so I don't need to put it on for each note. And it's important that it falls a few ticks before the first note. So I've done that in this case to illustrate the version of altered voicings that happens with this warm trigger note enabled. Now, in real life, you'd probably not want this one variation for all the voicings. It'll work for some better than others, but let's just explore how it works with this variation on all of these trigger notes. So here it added a sus over there, sus4, and it adds a 9 on here, which doesn't work really over that D minor 7 chord. Still doesn't work great over that altered dominant, but it's at least a little bit more colorful with some altered notes. Now here's the next version, and here I've triggered the D sharp, and this is what they call color. And this adds optional notes of the 9th, 11th, or 13th, so it'll be a little bit more color notes added. And again, some will work better than others. So here again, nice big dominant here, and this 9 didn't work over the 3 minor chord. So we had a nice altered dominant on the last chord, but not quite what we needed to fit the extensions that I had in the piano voicing. Here's the next version where I'm triggering the F sharp, and this is what they call crunch. And this adds altered scale notes for the optional extensions that are added on. And this should work better with that last chord. Now here it's altering them a lot, and I've altered my piano chords to fit. So it's G7 altered C7 instead of C minor. And again, all this from that one trigger note still. So the only thing that's changing is these black notes altering the voicings. So these minor chords have been turned to altered dominants. Let's continue. So that last chord worked wonderfully. Let's listen again. Let's go to the next variation, and this one is triggering the A sharp, and this is what they call cinematic, and it uses chordal harmony, meaning it voices it in fourths, so we get a nice open voicing sound. So it doesn't work on the last chord on that altered dominant, but it is a more open fourth style voicing. Here's the next variation where it triggers the B flat, and this is what they call tension, and this creates altered scale notes, and it uses very heavily altered extensions like the sharp 9, the flat 13, the flat 9, those kinds of notes. So this is really not working at all. I had to laugh a little bit because the notes are really outside, but there are certainly altered extensions. I'd need to alter the accompaniment, but I just want to illustrate how much it's altering the voicing just from that single trigger note. So that's the farthest away from the regular diatonic voicings. So let's take a look at this little pattern here using different alterations on different notes to come up with the best combination possible to work with this chord pattern. I've got all of the black keys which are being used to alter the voicings. I've got them all colored in blue here. So you can see these red notes are the actual notes that are triggering the smart chords, and these blue notes are the black keys over here that are altering the voicings. In some cases on repeated notes I'm using different voicings. Now I've turned off note chase for this because I don't want it to chase all the previous notes. Like for example, one of them, I think I left like these two notes over here. I don't want it being triggered by this alteration. I want them just working at their regular detente smart chord voicings. So the blue notes, just to reiterate, represent the black keys that are being used to alter the voicing, and I'm changing them frequently here, as you can see throughout this little pattern. So let's listen. So again, with that one trigger note, I've found an alteration here that'll fit that altered dominant voicing. So those are smart chords. Turn it on or off with that, and press that to open it up and select your key and then chord map from over here. This will work equally well with minor keys. Of course, if I play it back now, it'll sound dissonant because the accompaniment is all meant for B flat major. Dominant 7 or Dorian mode based voicings. So smart chords. See you for more in the next video.